First off, Duval. The Jacksonville Jaguars select Travis Hunter, wide receiver, defensive back from Colorado.
So the Jacksonville Jaguars go bold, sort of like the color of the jacket. Travis Hunter is dancing his way out of the green room in, taking that hot pink to the land of teal in Duval County.
What's up, fellow Jags fans? With the NFL draft coming up on Thursday, I wanted to do a Jaguars draft preview special. Just kind of talk about what the Jaguars can look to do in this upcoming draft, talk about the needs. We'll go over some of the players that are being mocked to the Jags, but without a first round pick, mock drafts really aren't that helpful because it's not super accurate. Right, when you're picking in the mid 50s, these mock drafts are not going to be the best at figuring out which players are still left. But we'll talk about the needs the Jaguars have, whether or not they should trade up, and really just kind of with the mindset of how the Jaguars go about making the playoffs for back-to-back seasons for the first time since 1999. Right, in 2025, the 13 wins were the most wins the franchise has had since 1999. And I think now with Liam Cohen, Tony Baselli, the goal is to kind of have sustained success with the franchise here. And the way you're going to do that is the draft. And right, like I think we saw in free agency, the Jaguars obviously were not very active in going and acquiring external free agents. Chris Rodriguez was really the only name that the Jaguars signed externally. They tried to sign Jake Bobo. However, that did not work out, him being a restricted free agent, and Seattle matched. And then, of course, right, like two major players left the Jaguars in free agency. Devin Lloyd, coming off of the best season of his career, and Travis Etienne, staple in the Jaguars backfield the last 4 years. After that first season, he lost entirely due to the Liz Frank injury in the preseason. And so, right, I think when you look at that and you talk about the Jaguars' needs, right, the first is going to be, one of the major needs is going to be replacing Devin Lloyd and at that linebacker position. And when you look at what the Jaguars have on the roster at linebacker right now, Foye Oluokun, obviously a staple, but he is 30 years old, right? And so you wonder how long he can keep up the production that he's done over his career as a Jaguar. Dennis Gadrick, they re-signed after he had a strong year last year, and so he'll definitely continue to see the field. And then I think when you talk about trying to replace Devin Lloyd, we're going to look at Ventrell Miller and Jack Kaiser. Jack Kaiser did not get on the field too much as a rookie last year, and Ventrell Miller didn't get on the field too much last year, partly I think because right, Devin Lloyd was playing so well, which I think surprised a lot of people because in the offseason last year, the Jags decided not to pick up his fifth-year option. There was talk that he was going to be replaced, traded, maybe even let go before the season started, and then he went out to have the best year of his career. But I think this upcoming year, Ventrell Miller is certainly going to get the shot to be the replacement for Devin Lloyd. But when you look at a lot of the mock drafts, right, I think a lot of people are thinking the Jags are going to go linebacker in the second round. I personally don't think that'll be the case, but it's definitely one of their major needs. And right, like I would be shocked if on Friday in the NFL draft, the Jaguars have 4 picks, right? 1 pick in the second round, then 3 picks in the third round. I think it's a pretty solid bet that a linebacker will be one of those 4 picks. Whether it's the second round pick, I'm not sure. But there's no question the Jags need to address the linebacker position early in the 2026 draft. In total, the Jaguars have 11 picks. Like we said, 4 on Friday currently, 1 in the second round, 3 in the third round. And a lot of people are talking about, will the Jaguars move up in the draft because they have so many picks that they could potentially bundle. I do not think that's something that James Gladstone's going to do. This is a draft class that is known for being more deep, but not necessarily filled with top-end talent. So I'm not sure that it makes sense for the Jaguars to try and trade up, trade back into the first round. So my personal opinion is this will be the first draft in Jaguars history where the Jaguars do not have a first round pick and they do not make a first round pick selection. I think that's a pretty safe bet. Now, a lot of people are also talking about, of course, the Jaguars don't have a first round pick because they traded their first round pick last year to move up 3 slots to select Travis Hunter. And Travis Hunter's been in the news a lot this week about whether he's going to play wide receiver much this season. And I think there was a lot of drama that came about that, but I don't think there's much to it other than the fact that I think when you look at the Jaguars roster and when we talk about the next need that the Jaguars have in the draft, and I personally think this is the Jaguars' biggest need on the roster currently. When you look at the Jaguars secondary, it's obvious that Travis Hunter needs to play every snap on defense. He's their number 1 corner going into the season. The reason the Jaguars lost to the Bills last year is because their secondary couldn't hold up against Josh Allen, right? Josh Allen was picking the defense apart. Greg Newsome played awful. Obviously, got burnt on the big play in the fourth quarter. But the Jaguars secondary just couldn't hold up against Josh Allen. And while a lot of people will talk about the Jags pass rush, and we'll get into that, that's certainly a need on the team. But Josh Hines Allen was actually getting quite a bit of pressure in that game. Trayvon Walker was generating some pressure. It wasn't like Josh Allen had all day to throw back there in the pocket, but he was picking apart the defense because the secondary was so weak. And yes, obviously the Jaguars had a lot of injuries. Obviously Travis Hunter wasn't playing in that playoff game. Jordan Lewis was hurt for a significant portion of the season. Eric Murphy as well was hurt for a significant portion of the season. But again, I think when we talk about this, that's why the Jaguars need to invest in the secondary in this upcoming draft. And I think you'll see them address both corner and safety early in the draft. And again, I would be shocked if one of those 4 Friday picks, the day 2 picks, isn't at corner or safety or potentially both, right? Because when you look at corner, Buster Brown, obviously he re-signed this offseason. The front office definitely values what he did, and coming from a seventh round draft pick, right? Like I think he's certainly overachieved any expectations you might have had for him. But the question is, right, like he's not a number 1 corner, right? And we're hoping that he continues to play at like a number 2 level corner like he did last year, right, in the Jaguars system with Campanelli. Obviously, like it's a good fit, but I don't think you want to go into the season thinking he's your number 1 corner. So Travis Hunter is going to be your number 1 corner. And right, like I think from what we saw early in the season last year, right, like the first couple of games he didn't play much at corner. Then the Jaguars started having the injuries, traded Tyson Campbell, and you started to see him play more and more at corner. I think the film showed that right, like Travis Hunter can play at the NFL level at corner. I don't think there's any question about that. But outside of that, right, like I think you still have a lot of questions here. I think you want to try and add some top end talent into this cornerback room, someone who you think can develop in a number 1 or number 2 corner. So you give kind of Travis Hunter a little bit of that flexibility. So maybe a year or 2 down the line, he can play more at wide receiver in the going seasons. But for right now, I think he's locked in at corner this year and just playing wide receiver a little bit more sparingly. But 2 other players I want to mention here at the cornerback position, right? Like Jerrion Jones, he played really well last year from Florida State. He will continue to get playing time, but again, right, like I think the Jaguars need to add some depth here. And then there's also, when we talk about the secondary, there's the question about Caleb Bransall. Obviously, he missed all of last year due to injury, but he did look good in camp next year. So that is one player they will get back, kind of like an extra draft pick in the secondary. And so I think the hope is that he can be a pretty big factor contributing to this 2026 season. And right, like has the ability to play safety or corner, I think. So we'll see what he does this upcoming season. And then when you look at the starting safeties for 2026, Eric Murphy and Antonio Johnson, right? Like Antonio Johnson continues to develop, look to be a good player on this team. Eric Murphy's 32 years old, and again, he's coming off injury. And so, right, I think this is a position that the Jaguars definitely need to address. They need to have some extra depth in the secondary. And I think for sure one, if not two of those 4 day 2 picks is going to be used at the secondary to try and upgrade that position. The other big need I would call out here for the Jags, and this is something that I'm always a firm believer in, is improving the offensive line. And I think when you look at the offensive line, the area that probably needs the most improvement is the interior of the offensive line, because with the tackles, you do at least have Anton Harrison in there at tackle, right tackle, and he obviously is someone that the team believes in. Got the 5th-year extension, and right, like I think there's no question that he's going to receive a contract extension. He's proven himself to be very worthy of that, right? Like I wouldn't say he's an elite right tackle, but he is certainly someone who is very solid. Then at left tackle, I think you have a little more questions. Cole Van Lanen played really well last year before getting injured. I think that's definitely someone who the Jaguars missed in that playoff game against Buffalo, because I don't think there's any question that Walker Little is not a starting caliber left tackle in the NFL. Right? This is another bulky pick that certainly didn't pan out, 2nd-round pick. He's a guy who he's fine as a backup. He's got way too big of a contract, in my opinion. But he's not someone you can be starting long term. But even still, I feel a little more comfortable with Anton Harrison and Cole Van Lanen. And then Walker Little is a fine guy to have from a depth perspective, right? Like if you need him to come in for a game or two, but ideally you don't want him to be your left tackle in the playoff game. But I think when you look in the interior offensive line, the Jaguars have a little less depth. And again, these names that the Jaguars are starting, they're not elite. I would argue the Jaguars are not elite at any position in the offensive line, right? Like Anton Harrison's definitely the best player, but even he's still not elite. But I would at least say that he's above average for the position. I think every other player on the Jaguars offensive line, right? Like you're saying, yeah, maybe they're 15, 16, 17 at that position in the league. But that's probably not good enough, right? Like if the Jaguars want to win the Super Bowl. And, right, the Jaguars need to protect Trevor Lawrence. He's a franchise quarterback. Franchise quarterbacks, you need to protect those guys. You need to have a strong offensive line. And we look at the interior offensive line of the Jags, Ezra Cleveland, Patrick McCurry, and Robert Hainsey, right? Like these are all guys who came from other teams, kind of a patchwork group. Robert Hainsey obviously had experience with Liam Cohen in Tampa, but in Tampa, when Liam Cohen was there, they benched him for a rookie that they picked up, right? So I think this is something that James Gladstone, Tony Baselli, right? I don't think there's anyone in Jaguars history who knows more about playing offensive line than Tony Baselli, right? Like they're gonna look to improve this position, and right, like I think in the 2nd round, interior offensive line is somewhere where you can actually really get good quality players, right? Like we see teams pick up good interior offensive linemen in the 2nd round. It's not like tackle, right? The tackles typically tend to get pushed up into the 1st rounds, right? So your generational tackle talents usually are going pretty early, but your interior offensive linemen, these are guys that you can pick up in later rounds. I'm hoping the Jaguars use at least one of the first 4 picks in the interior offensive line, and then maybe another pick later in the draft to again kind of continue getting that depth in the offensive line, because you can never have too many offensive linemen. And I think, to be honest, the Jaguars were pretty lucky last year that for the most part the offensive line stayed healthy. Yeah, there were moments when players got injured, but for the most part these guys played most of the games last year. With the exception, obviously, of the bad timing of the Cole Van Lanen injury, getting hurt at the end of the Week 18 game, and then he ended up missing the playoffs. Right, and I think coming in for me, probably the last spot I would say for an immediate need for the Jaguars it is certainly a need, but interior defensive line. The Jaguars didn't get much pass rush last year from the interior defensive line, and we saw just this week the Jaguars made a trade for Rook Aurora. I don't necessarily think he's going to be the answer either, to be honest, but he's probably an upgrade over Mason Smith. It's at least a chance to change scenery for both players, and the hope is that maybe Rook Aurora fits a little bit better in Campanelli's system than he did in Atlanta, and at least he can be a rotational player for the Jags in 2026. Eric Armstead, again, is a year older. I do think he played pretty well at the beginning of last season, but definitely tailed off towards the end. And so I don't think you can expect him to be much of an upgrade over what he gave you last year towards the second half, to be honest. He's 32 years old. Tough to imagine a 32-year-old defensive lineman getting better at this point, but he will at least provide you something. And then obviously Devin Hamilton, right? Like he's a great player for what he is, right? Like he's an exceptional run stuffer, one of the best run stuffer defensive linemen in the league, but he's not a pass rush guy. And I think that's really the Jaguars need here is pass rush. But then the question is, how much pass rush are you going to get with these day 2 or day 3 picks? It's hard to find those guys, right? Like you're kind of looking for a diamond in the rough here. And I think the Jaguars will definitely take a shot at that, but again, I would still grade corner, linebacker, and interior offensive line. I think I would go over interior defensive line from a need perspective. Now, when we look at the mocks here, right, like looking at the most recent mocks, again, it's a day 2 draft mock, right? So the Jaguars' first pick is number 56. The chances that these guys are going to get the first 55 picks correctly are even close, right? So it's tough to really tell what the Jaguars could potentially draft here. But as you can see on the screen, right, guys like Field Yates have the Jags drafting a linebacker, Trotter from Missouri. I've seen multiple mock drafts with the Jags drafting Caleb Banks from the University of Florida, the interior defensive line upgrade. I always think that the Jaguars end up getting mocked players from Florida just because of the proximity to the college. It makes it a fun write-up for the writer, but we'll see. I've seen people mention Jadarian Price to the Jags. I don't see James Gladstone using the first pick of the draft this year for the Jags to address the running back position. I think that's why they went out and paid Chris Rodriguez what they did. I think the team believes in Bashal Tutin. The team likes LeQuint Allen. And I think the Jags think they can find a running back later in the draft. I would be very surprised if one of the 11 picks that the Jaguars make this weekend is not a running back. I do think they'll draft a running back, but I don't think it's going to be a running back at number 56. Jake Goldlay, another guy from Cincinnati that people have mentioned. If I was going to bet, I would say that for sure that the Jags are going to try and address the defensive side of the ball at pick 56. I just think they have more pressing holes on the defensive side. When you look at the offensive side, right, like you're really set at wide receiver, you're obviously set at quarterback. At some point they could probably draft a tight end, but I don't think that's a humongous need, right? Like I think you feel really good about Brenton Strange and what he can do both in the passing game and the blocking game, but they could probably use some depth behind him. They did re-sign Quentin Morris, but I still think you kind of want someone else there. And then running back, again, I think the Jaguars do look to add some depth. It's the nice part about having 11 picks, but I don't think that's going to be their day 2 priority. Offensive line, I definitely hope the Jaguars pick someone in the offensive line, but I think that if the Jaguars do go offense with pick 56, I think offensive line is the most likely scenario. But again, I think the Jaguars look to try and bolster up that defense because at the end of the day, right, like they didn't get enough stops against Buffalo. And I think when you look at what happened with Buffalo the next week, right, And I think this is why the Jaguars need to go secondary, is because look at how Josh Allen played against Denver. He was a turnover machine. I think he had 5 turnovers in that game, and he really kind of cost his team the game. And then compare that to what he did against Jacksonville. It looked like he wasn't going to he didn't make a single mistake against the Jags. He picked the Jaguars defense apart, and I think that's just because obviously there was some injury. I think the Jaguars would have loved to have Travis Hunter out there. Maybe he could have made a big play that would have been the difference maker in that game, because the two teams overall are pretty even. Honestly, I still think the Jags were the better team. They just weren't the better team that day. And I think when we look to try and build for 2026, I think look for the Jaguars to address the defense first. But let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think the Jaguars' biggest needs are for 2026? What do you think they're going to pick at pick 56? And I think everyone here is very excited, right? We have the draft coming up in a couple of days. I'll definitely be making some reaction videos for all the day 2 Jaguars picks. And if they do happen to make a trade up into day 1, I'll certainly be on top of that as well. And thanks. I appreciate you guys listening to the episode here. Please subscribe, comment below, and go Jags.